I am Saskia van Gendt, Head of Sustainability at Rothy's. I've been working in sustainability for about a decade or more and have worked in different product companies and big focus on sustainable manufacturing and design. And at Rothy's, I'm very lucky that I get to work with every single team. We have a company-wide strategy around sustainability, but it's very much mobilized through each of the teams. Product, we own our own factory, manufacturing, distribution of product, and also on the people and community side, getting to work with our team and our very wonderful community of Rothy's fans. And Rothy's, if you're not familiar, we transform all different kinds of recycled materials into timeless footwear and accessories. We have a bag range as well as a number of different footwear silhouettes. And one fact that we're really excited about is that to date, Rothy's has repurposed nearly 100 million plastic water bottles into these products that we make. Rothy's has been building a sustainable brand since day one, and it's very fortunate that from the beginning, the co-founders recognized the issue of waste in our industry and built that from the very beginning into the product designs, how we manufacture, and sustainability as a journey and as an evolution continues to build on that really strong foundation. Rothy's strives for zero waste and has been looking at our manufacturing processes, our supply chain, our products, our employees, how we ship our products, and truly sustainability is considered at every part of the company. And I mentioned the co-founders, when we first started the company, they recognized the amount of waste that existed in traditional footwear. There was so much in just producing each piece that was stitched together. The supply chains were enormous with long lead times, and the production processes resulted in a ton of overproduction, just producing for a whole season, not based on actual customer demand. And Rothy's is spinning that model on its head and building this new model from scratch. So it starts with materials. And I think one of the recognitions at the time was that every company was using the same kinds of materials to build their shoes. And Rothy started with the idea of using recycled plastics and thread, and was very conscious that there was already a ton of plastic that was in our environment and could be repurposed into a beautiful product. And by using a very modern and technology forward 3D knitting process, they're able to take the thread and transform it into a beautiful, beautiful product. So the construction process uses a 3D knitting machine that is programmed to really knit each shape into the shoe or the bag, rather than taking a piece of fabric and cutting a shape out of it. And that process itself is able to avoid about 30 to 40% of the material that's normally wasted on the cutting room floor. So we're really proud of the production process that we have. And then I think really inherent in sustainability and the idea of circularity for footwear and apparel in general is designing for durability and longevity. And we're also very proud that Rothy's only makes products that are washable. So if you have a stain or something drops on your shoe or you're in the mud, you can just throw your shoes in the wash. And it really is a product that's built to last. And just the practice of extending the product's life has a significant waste, water, and carbon benefit. So just using a product, wearing a product 9 extra months can reduce the footprint by 30%. So altogether, there's a huge and ever evolving, and I'm excited to talk about some of the new initiatives that we're doing, but a really strong foundation of Rothy's in looking across materials, production, and then the product itself. There's very much the brands that were built around sustainability, like Rothy's, and the idea to produce the shoe, transforming materials and using a 3D knitting process was the foundation of Rothy's. But there are also brands that are recognizing the value in sustainability and sometimes retrofitting their operations to incorporate better sustainable practices. I think one thing that is important for a sustainable brand is not just having one aspect of the brand that's looking at maybe its materials or the community aspects, but taking a very holistic view of sustainability and how it can influence everything that the company does. And that's the future, because it's the science of sustainability is very holistic. It's very interconnected. You make a change around your materials or your supply chain, and it influences something else. It can change how much waste you're producing. It changes your carbon footprint. So the interconnectedness of the strategy and taking a holistic view is very important. And then thinking on the external side, there's so much, and I think positively, there's so much customer pressure to be better in what we're doing. And it's not enough just to have one aspect of sustainability in consideration. Customers expect you to be really looking at the people side of sustainability as well as the environmental side, and to continue to make iterations and bring them along in how you're making progress. Yeah, the pandemic has, within our industry, highlighted a number of different vulnerabilities. We've seen, rightly so, a great attention on workers' rights and the effect on workers when contracts are not met. Huge amount of overproduction, just the amount of product produced for a season without really responding to the customer demand. And I think that those vulnerabilities exposed how our industry can be better. Rothy's, again, has a different business model, which has helped us significantly, just being able to produce on demand, not carrying a lot of excess inventory, being very resourceful in our supply chain. We have a much more streamlined supply chain. And then by owning our own factory, we were able to really dial back production as we needed to. And because we own our factory, we don't have the ability to cut a contract. The people that work at our factory are also our employees, and we're responsible for them, and they're part of our community. So I think the vulnerabilities that we saw and the awareness that was raised through the pandemic, Rothy's was a bit buffered into that. I think one other thing that I really appreciated, just from a sustainability planning point of view, is that we're able to take a little bit more of an elevated look at the entire business and to become really crystal clear on what we want to do in the future for Rothy's, not just building on our existing model, but putting a stake in the ground about where we want to go and having a little bit of time and planning in order to do that. And we recently announced a really exciting commitment to achieve circular production by 2023. And that's very much the rollout of this time that we've had in order to take a bigger view and put a stake in the ground in where we're going. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about what those plans are, but we're hoping to create end-of-wear options for all of our products for Rothy's, but also open it up and share the information and the know-how around circularity within our industry with other brands, and really use the power of collaboration to minimize waste and achieve circularity. Marketing and sustainability should go hand in hand, and it's important for brands to communicate what they're doing as part of how we engage customers in participating in sustainability. So there is a big value in the marketing side of sustainability. The tension, of course, is greenwashing, and how do we make sure that we're as accountable as we can be around our goals and our ambitions for sustainability. And for me, that's a couple of things. I think I'm a scientist, and I always rely on data and science in order to inform our sustainability strategy, to identify metrics that we can track against and make progress towards. So tracking our overall material use, waste in production and other parts of our supply chain, our total carbon footprint, and leaning into the accountability that comes from having numbers to quantify what you're doing on sustainability. So I think that the science of sustainability and metrics and tracking are really critical. And then there's also this communication and transparency around what you're doing, what's going well, but also when things aren't going perfectly, what those learnings are from that. And looking ahead when we're thinking about the recycling program that we're planning on piloting this year, I think that's a big opportunity to look within our industry to identify what we could be doing better around the design part of shoe construction or material sourcing, and to bring the customer along on that journey. It's not going to be a seamless process, I anticipate, just because it is very unprecedented to create recycling at scale. And there's a kind of beauty in that vulnerability and learning and bringing transparency into that. And so I'm excited actually to bring the customer along on that. And the other side of it is there's very much a customer accountability. And once you're putting goals out there, as we have with our circularity goals, we want to make sure that we're bringing the customer along and sharing that progress, what's going well, what we want to change. And it's equally important that our actions reflect the mission that we've set out for ourselves. I am, of course, an eternal optimist, and I think there is significant progress that's happening, which I'd love to talk about too. But I think there's a couple of just points of inertia within our industry around the business model that a lot of brands are built on, which is a very linear business model. It's designed to use virgin materials that are petroleum-based materials and require a huge amount of extraction in getting those materials. Or on the animal side, maybe there's a lot of leather coming from to be used in different parts of the industry, but they're all virgin materials, not recovered from other processes. So the use of virgin materials is very much part of this inertia. The overproduction and building on multiple seasons, producing with anticipation of a whole season sale without the agility of producing based on what's actually needed and what the customer wants. I think that there's also a certain amount of inertia there, just in so many brands are outsourcing huge parts of their supply chain, and that becomes this embedded demand and flow that almost has its own momentum, and it's hard to scale and be nimble and adjusting to what the customer is actually demanding. There's also, unfortunately, still a pretty large fast fashion mentality, in the sense that products that are being produced are very much designed for specific seasons and trends. They're often cheaply produced and do not last. They're not designed to last. And the downside of that is this linear model is very much producing products with a one-way ticket to a landfill. And the circular model, of course, seeks to disrupt that by reclaiming materials, using efficient production to produce on demand, and then thinking about the products themselves and end of wear. So I'm quite optimistic about the momentum around circularity. But the other thing to undercut with these different pieces of the supply chain is that there are people that are being affected at every stage of the supply chain. There's vulnerabilities within communities that are adjacent to extraction facilities. For example, landfills tend to be proximate to more vulnerable populations. So the thing that I'm quite mindful of is, yes, there's waste and there's a carbon footprint associated with the linear model that exists, but there's also this human component to that. And I think that it's something we've become more aware of through COVID and the pandemic, but it's also something I think we need to be mindful of as sustainable professionals. When we're building more circular models, how does that also have the potential to benefit, especially vulnerable communities that could be affected by the current model? As a scientist, I think coming back to the science of sustainability is really important, and making sure that you have a strategy that is rooted in the science of sustainability and the data to inform your direction. And even if you aren't able to have that in-house, there's lots of different services and companies that can help you build a strategy, a sustainability strategy that is based in science and data. So I definitely encourage that as a foundation for identifying the actions that you want to take. And by this analysis that comes from the science of sustainability, it will help you target the actions that are most material to your industry or to your type of production or the product you're making. For example, if you're quantifying your total carbon footprint and you identify that because of your supply chain or where you're transporting products from A to B, that transportation is a huge part of your footprint in terms of the total carbon footprint of transportation, then that's an area for you to immediately go after. So I think that the science and the data can really drive the most important actions. And then we talked a little bit about the marketing and greenwashing. I think it's important to really be genuine around both the why and the how of what you're doing, and to be clear around what you're doing today and where you want to go into the future. And that humbleness that I think is important as part of sustainability will earn you a ton of credibility with your customers, but it's also a way for you to be clear about what you're going to do today and where you want to go into the future. So that bringing the customer along and really articulating the how and the why and the progress towards that will also serve you very well. I think it's important to emphasize that brands and organizations, whether it be governments or larger entities, have a huge role in really making step change around issues around waste and carbon. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure put on the individual consumer to change their practices. And I think it's twofold. The consumer has to be brought along and empowered to make decisions that support the issues that we care about around sustainability, but the brands have so much influence to change their practices and make those magnitude shifts that are really necessary when it comes to global issues around our carbon footprint and climate change. So I think that it's important for brands to be making really significant progress and for customers to hold both brands and other institutions responsible for making significant progress. And as consumers, we do play a significant role in how we can encourage the brands that we support to be better. And that comes from the dialogue that we have with the brands that we love on social media, the interaction that we have with their customer service team. So I always encourage people to feel empowered as customers to pressure and healthy pressure around asking brands to do better in ways that are important to you. And then I think at large, there's just so much single-use plastic, and the pandemic, I think, has increased certain amounts of single-use plastic. And this is an issue that Rothy's is very passionate about. We've tried to repurpose as much single-use plastic as we can for the products that we use, both for footwear and marine plastics going into our accessories and bags. But we also just, as a collection, need to dial down the tap in how much plastics we're using, single-use plastic. So I think I would love that we, as Rothy's, stopped having so much availability of that material and had the opportunity to repurpose a different material. And then I think the other thing is within our supply chains, as brands, as manufacturers, there's an elegance in simplicity. And for example, construction of a garment or a shoe, if we can dematerialize, streamline the number of materials in the construction, then there's so much more potential for us to actually recover those materials to create more circular models. So from the design standpoint, material selection, supply chain point of view, can we just minimize a bit the number of different materials and how we're actually putting products together just to facilitate a more zero waste future as collective brands, something I'm quite passionate about. But as I said, I'm an optimist, and I think that there's so much momentum, especially around circularity and creating more collaborative models. So the last thing I would say is the power of collaboration, the forum that we have here today to share information openly across brands, to learn from each other, and to figure out how we can work together to move our industry forward. That's what gives me hope, and I'm so appreciative just to have this forum in order to do that more. It's been great to share more about the story behind Rothy's. Thank you so much for being a part of the Sustainable Fashion Forum.